Okay, welcome everyone. This is Successful Self-Publishing. My name's Percival Constantine, but please feel free to call me Perry if you'd like. Before I begin the presentation, just a few little housekeeping notes so the session can operate smoothly. First of all, if your mic is not muted, then please mute yourself throughout the presentation. This is just to keep free of distractions or sudden background noises or anything like that. Also, make sure that your name is set to whatever you want to be called when we get to the Q&A section and not to a device name or something. And please make sure it's written in Romaji if you're instead of a Japanese name, so it makes it easy for me to read. I don't have to try to spend time deciphering it. To change the name, just click the three dots next to your name in the participants window or the more window and select rename, and you can change it that way. We'll have a Q&A section at the end of the presentation, so please hold your questions until that point. Also, you might see there I am recording the session, but that's pretty much just for you all. I'm not going to be posting this recording up anywhere on the internet or anything like that. This is just kind of a record, so if any of you would like a copy of this recording to refer back to in the future, then just email me and I'll be able to send you one. But even still, if you don't want your video, your face appearing on the recording, just make sure you turn off your video, and then you won't have that problem. So with all that said, let's begin. So this presentation, it's going to be something of a mix of my own personal journey in self-publishing, as well as some of the best practices that have worked for me. Now, there are really two key points I want you to keep in mind as you listen to what I have to say. The first is, it's never too late to change things around. So if you've tried self-publishing before, or if you're currently trying it and it's not really working for you, then I hope you'll learn through what I have to say that you can always pivot to something new and you can always turn it around. The second point I want to make, and I also want to emphasize this really strongly, is that this is just stuff that has worked for me personally, and that's for me to date. It doesn't mean that what I'm about to tell you is the only way, nor does it mean that the strategies and tactics I'm using now will remain the same ones I use 10 years from now or even 10 weeks from now. One of the things I've learned after 13 years in self-publishing is that the entire business can and frequently does change on a dime. Okay, so my story begins in 2005, and it's a beginning that will no doubt sound pretty familiar to you all. I wanted to become a published author. So I wrote a book, and when I was ready to get it published, I did what everyone told me to do. I started querying agents. I must have sent out about 50 different submission packets, trying my best not to be driven mad by the sheer variety of different requirements that all the different agents had. Of those 50 submissions, I got about 20 responses in total, and all 20 of them were rejections. And of those 20, maybe 3 were not form letters. And those 3 all basically said the same thing. It was an interesting first work, but we don't think there was a market for it. And it's kind of hard to argue with them. My first book, like probably a lot of people's first books, was basically kind of a brain dump of all the different things I had floating around in my head. And I thought about just giving up on it and moving on to something new. But then I started looking into other options. And one of those things I found is what's known as vanity publishing. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, vanity publishing is basically paying a company to print and list your book. And as a fresh college graduate who wished I had a dime to my name, I couldn't really afford these publishing packages that sometimes ran in the thousands of dollars. And that's when I found this website called Lulu. This was a print-on-demand company. And unlike the vanity publishers, Lulu didn't require you to spend any money up front. If you could produce the print-ready files on your own, then you could submit them and they'd print a copy of your book whenever an order was placed. And for an extra $20 or so, they'd slap an ISBN on the back cover and they'd list it in Ingram so people could special order it from bookstores or they could order it off the internet. So I put out my first book. I had some familiarity with Adobe and Adobe Photoshop and InDesign. And so I tried to boost my skills to the best of my ability and to get a copy of my book out. I prepared the files, and then in March of 2007, my first title, Fallen, was available for sale. You could order it from Barnes & Noble if you asked, or you could order it off the internet. But how to promote it? How to get people to actually put down money for the book? Now, this was just when Facebook had been coming out. This is mostly just for college students back then. And I looked at my Facebook page, and I saw that I had a few hundred friends. So I thought, well, I can get them to help me, right? So I created a Facebook group called Help Make My Book a Bestseller. And I invited my hundreds of Facebook friends to join. And most of them did. And I told everyone in the group that I wanted their help to promote my book. My idea was that if I got everyone to buy and review the book, then maybe it could get some attention. So now I know what you're thinking. It's a stupid plan. No way it would work. And you know what? You're right. The plan was a total failure. That first year, I think I sold maybe 2 copies of the book in total. One of those copies was bought by my mother, who to this day has never actually read the book. And that was the first hard lesson I had to learn.
Run, Mike.
Your friends and your family probably don't give a good goddamn about your book.
Yeah.
No matter what they say, chances are they don't really care. They're not gonna, they say they want to help out, but chances are they won't. But I persisted, right? I kept publishing, putting out about 1 book every year or so. And then when the Kindle Revolution came along, I started publishing them in ebook format. I even got some more sales and reviews from strangers even. And though the money wasn't much, it was nice to know that I could call myself a professional author. Because as Stephen King once said, if you wrote something for which someone sent you a check, if you cashed the check and it didn't bounce, and if you then paid the light bill with the money, I consider you talented. For me, it wasn't the light bill, probably a few drinks at a $2 beer night, but whatever. Still, I felt like I had accomplished something. And I was having fun writing and publishing as a hobby. And it generated some pocket change. And these are some of the examples of the original books I published. And for some people, that's all they really want, right? There are a lot of hobbyists out there. They just want a copy of their book that they wrote on their shelf. And if you're one of those people, more power to you. But as time went on, I realized that wasn't really enough for me. I wanted to actually make something of my writing career. Maybe not becoming a full-time author or getting a movie deal, but at least making enough money to be a part-time author. So I started doing some research and learning more about the self-publishing business. And I quickly learned the second hard lesson of my career. I was doing everything wrong. So that brings me to the next part. Is self-publishing right for you? And let's start to answer that question. First, the benefits of self-publishing. There are no gatekeepers, right? You could say goodbye to looking up agents and their query guidelines and waiting months or even longer for a response. You get 100% creative control. Niches are totally welcome. If you want to write your dream novel about a samurai monkey who battles hell demons in a dystopian cyberpunk space empire, go for it. There's no acquisitions editor or agent who can tell you it will never get published. And nobody steal that idea, I call dibs. 70% royalties on average. This is for ebooks, and there are still some caveats depending on the price of your book and also the book vendor. Also some electronic distribution fees, depending on if your book is really big. But on average, you're looking at 70% of every copy you sell. You can publish on your own schedule. If you want to publish once a month, you can go for it. If you want to publish once every 5 years, that's your choice. You get to choose your own schedule. And you choose how long your book remains in print. There's no sunset deal on your book's life. It will only go out of print if you want to take it out of print. Next, changes can be made easily. If you need a new cover, no problem. If you just upload a new one. Find a typo, Go ahead and correct it, upload the new version. Want to change the price? Easiest thing in the world. If you get a great pull quote from a famous author, right? You can just slap it on the product description. All of this can be done in minutes or so, right? It's very easy to make these changes. You get full control over your promotions. So a few months ago, when it became obvious that the pandemic was going to lead to shutdowns, I decided to run a massive sale on my entire book catalog. I made the first book in each of the series free, and then I discounted the rest of the books to 99 cents. No approval process, no long wait. I was able to get the books discounted on the vendors and get a landing page set up all within about a day. But of course, nothing's perfect. And when there are benefits, there are also drawbacks. 100% creative control means 100% responsibility. You are responsible for every aspect of your book. If something goes wrong, you can't blame the publisher or the editor or the marketing department. It's all on you. You are no longer just a writer. You are the publisher. And that includes editorial, art, print, and marketing departments. And this kind of connects to the first one, right? You have to take control of everything. If there's some aspect of the publishing process that you can't do on your own, you have to delegate it to someone else, which will mean paying them to do it. And I won't lie, that can be expensive. Publisher perish has never been more true. Now, I don't think it's a stretch to say that a lot of people here at the conference come from the academic world, so you've probably heard this before in the academic context. And it's even more true in the world of self-publishing. The most successful self-published authors are the ones who crank out books one after the other. George R.R. Martin can, go years without putting out a new book, but you've got to start thinking yourself as the pulp writers of the 20s and 30s. You work or you starve. That's pretty much how it happens. It's also heavily geared towards genre tropes. Now, self-publishing allows for more freedom in terms of niches. That's definitely true. And there are genres that are easier to get traction in self-publishing, while that the big publishers maybe won't look at. However, to paraphrase Orwell, all genres are equal, but some genres are more equal than others. And that's at least in terms of sales, right? We're not talking quality or anything like that. That's too subjective. And the most voracious readers, I tend to find, of most voracious genre readers, they tend to be very invested in those genre tropes. So there are the times when you might feel like you are a slave to those tropes. This also means that if you write in a really obscure niche, you might have trouble finding an audience. It doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, nobody thought dinosaur and Bigfoot erotica would become huge sellers, but they did. This also means that if you're a writer of literary fiction, you might want to stick to the traditional publishing route. A lot of the tactics and strategies that have worked for self-published authors, they just don't really seem to work as well for literary authors. Again, doesn't mean it's impossible, just means that it's going to be a much harder road. And also, Kindle domination. Amazon is the 800-pound gorilla in the publishing world. And as much as I hate Jeff Bezos, as much as I want to see him taxed to hell and back, and as much as I am strongly suspicious that he's actually Lex Luthor come to life, fact remains that having your ebooks exclusive to Amazon does give you a potentially significant boost in profits. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later. So as I did my research, I realized what exactly I was doing wrong. I was writing in multiple genres. Successful authors were writing in a single one. I was writing a mix of standalone and series books, kind of depending on my mood. Successful authors were devoted to series books. I was writing when I felt like it. The successful authors were writing every single day. I was publishing one book a year. Successful authors were publishing several books a year, some of them even putting out a book a month, some of them even more than that, believe it or not. I was designing covers that were good enough. Successful authors were getting professional covers designed that looked very similar to other successful books in the genre. So it quickly became clear to me that if I wanted to get anywhere close to achieving my relatively modest goals of, part-time authorship, I'd have to start changing my thinking. I'd have to change my strategies, and I'd have to change the habits that I'd become so comfortable with. And the first of those was how much, or rather how little time I was devoting to actually writing books. And that brings me to the next hard lesson. Put your ass in the chair and write. Now, I know this kind of romantic myth about writing, that it should be hard and it should only happen when the muse strikes. But tell you the truth, my muse is an unreliable jackass, and I can't just wait for her to get her shit together. I've truly come to believe that writing is just a skill like any other. It can be drawing, exercising, playing an instrument, learning a language, whatever. The more you do it, the better you get. And the more consistent you get, the easier it will be. My writing schedule was completely erratic. I had my laptop with me all the time, and I would write pretty much whenever I felt like it. I was an ALT at the time, so whenever I had a free period in the school day, I would pop out my laptop and maybe, jot a few pages down or something, or a few hundred words. But basically, I would write whenever I had the time, whenever I felt like it, and I would hop between projects a lot. I would take weeks, even months off from writing. In short, I had zero discipline when it came to writing. And then I read this book. It's called 5,000 Words Per Hour. It's written by Chris Fox, who's a pretty successful self-published science fiction author. One of those guys who got so good at this business that he was able to quit his job as an app developer and start writing full-time. Now, there are two big takeaways that I got from this book. One, write in short sprints of about 20 to 30 minutes. Now, it can seem daunting if you're trying to devote 2 or 3 hours a week to writing. But if you break that up into 20 to 30 minutes of a day, that's a lot more doable. The second is make writing the first thing you do in the morning. I used to write whenever I had time, but more often than not, I was basically a nighttime writer. And as I said, my first job in Japan was as an ALT on the JET program. My school at the time was right across the street from my apartment, and I could make it home by 4:30 every afternoon without a problem. So that gave me plenty of time in the night to write. But when I finished with the JET program, my next job required an hour commute by car. And getting home at 6 or 7 at night after fighting through traffic meant I was hungry, I was irritable from the commute, and all I wanted to do was eat some dinner, have a drink, and watch Netflix. Writing was the furthest thing from my mind, and I continued slacking off. But then I read Chris's book, and even though I wasn't much of a morning person, I decided to try it. And it was hard at first, right? Waking up, an hour earlier to try and write in the morning, that was tough. But over time, it became easier. And more than that, it kind of made everything else in my day a lot easier as well. The rest of the day was a lot more relaxing. It passed by a lot smoother, and it was because I had finished my daily writing, right? I no longer had that hanging over my head. I no longer felt that I was neglecting something that I had to be doing. Does it always work? No, of course not. There are still days when I've got so much to do and I just don't have the time to write in the morning. And it's happened to me a lot over the past year with all the craziness with COVID-19. I have slacked off a lot this past year. But I do succeed more often than I fail. And it still does help the day go faster when I'm able to do it. So now that I was writing more, it was time to start thinking about how to write smarter and how to pursue my business in a smarter way. No more just writing what I felt like. I had to make a schedule, and I had to figure out which projects would take priority. And that meant it was time to take stock of the books I already had out. I was done with the standalone books and series because the series were more profitable. So I decided I was going to focus on those. Now, I had 2 series out at that point. One was the Infernum series. Those are the ones you see on the left here. And they were kind of a spy thriller focused on this espionage organization. And the other was the Myth Hunter series, which was more of a pulp adventure. Think Indiana Jones, Lara Croft, that kind of stuff. And I had 2 books out in each series. And these were the covers for them. Now, right away when I took stock, I realized that there were two major problems. The first, as you can see from these covers, is that they don't really tell you much about the genres that they're supposed to be in. And the second was, there's no way you would recognize these books as being part of the same series. So I decided I was going to make some new covers. The Infernum books got a total overhauls, while the Myth Hunter books just got minor updates. And I put a logo on each of them. Right? So as you can see here, I put these logos on them, and this was better, but still not enough. So then when I read the third book in each series, I decided to do another cover overhaul. Now, on the Infernum books, I made these more of, as you can see here, they're a little bit more closer to the action-adventure genre, and they've also got a little bit more of a unifying theme. And then for the Myth Hunter books, I contracted with kind of comic book artist, and he designed these covers. Now, they're great covers, but these changes still didn't really help. I made another change to the Infernum covers, and now you can see these are very clearly all part of the same series. The Myth Hunter books, you know, they're much more clear that they're part of the same series, but it still wasn't quite enough, and I still wanted to do more. So then I went with books with these covers that have more of the urban fantasy kind of feel to them. And then I also began writing a new series called the Vanguard Superhero Series. As you can see here, I started off with a comic book style artwork, but it didn't really go anywhere. The problem with this, as well as with these covers here, was that people didn't really know what they were reading, what they were buying. They looked at those covers and they thought it was a comic book. And that's not what it was. So you had comic book readers disappointed because they weren't getting a comic book. And you had novel readers who never even gave it a chance because they didn't know it was a novel. So I changed the covers here. And I had tried to do this as a serial, about a bi-weekly serial. So I released a new segment every 2 weeks or so, but it didn't quite work. And so I overhauled again. And then these are finally the covers I have now. So I was making more money at this point. I had finally had my first month where I broke $100 in profit, but I still felt like I could do more. And these books, as much as I liked those characters, as much as I loved writing in those worlds, as much fun as I had writing them, they just weren't cutting it. And that's when I learned another lesson. Know when to walk away. Your time is valuable, and each of your books has a budget, not necessarily a financial one, but also a creative one. And if a book or a series isn't turning a profit, then you got to seriously think about shifting gears and trying something new. Now that brings me to another Chris Fox book, and this is called Right to Market. So when you see this title, I know what you're probably dreading. He's going to start talking about chasing trends, and I'm not. The key takeaway I learned from this book is you want to find that intersection between what you want to write and what actually sells. Now for Chris, that was military sci-fi, right? He's a sci-fi nut, and he had tried to do a cross between the Heroes TV show and the X-Files. And it just didn't really connect. So he got smart about it. He researched the Amazon charts and he found that military sci-fi was, at the time, an underserved genre. He studied a few of the books that were popular and he identified common tropes and kept them in mind as he began writing his own book. When he got a cover designed, he made sure it matched the other covers in the genre. So I decided I'd do the same thing. Now, I had written a brief series of short stories featuring a paranormal investigator character. And I realized that this character was pretty much tailor-made for the urban fantasy genre. So I followed Chris's example and I researched that genre. And I focused on the books that featured male protagonists and identified the commonalities between them. And then I launched the Luther Cross series of novels. And it worked. That first book generated more income on its own in 1 month than all my books combined had generated in a year. Now, I ended this series with the 6th book, and those 6 books, they finished about a year ago, they still make up the bulk of my writing income. So how do you research the market? The hard way is by going to the best-selling charts on Amazon, and you select the genre you want. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a little demonstration of this a little bit later. So I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. But you look at the best-selling charts. You look at the top-selling book. You see what the rank is in the store. And then you look at the number 100 book, right? Now, if the number 1 book has a really high ranking, so like in the thousands or in the hundreds even, but number 100 has a really low rank, something below 50,000, now you could be looking at a very competitive genre. So now you check out a few of the other books from the top and bottom of the list, and you see how their ranks compare. And if you check out Right to Market, that book lays all this out and gives you a little bit more explanation of it. And I'll go into a little bit of detail if you guys would want to see that. If there's a clear drop-off between high ranks in the lists and the low ranks, then you could be looking at a genre that's hungry for competition. Now, if not, if those first books have a really low rank, or if the top 100 books, number 100 has a really high rank, then it might either be not competitive enough, right? Not enticing enough, or it might be too competitive. So then you might want to check out some other genres. And you want to try and find that segment where what you like and what is popular or what has potential. Now, there are some tools you can use to speed this process up. Of course, they cost money. One of them I use is called Kindle Spy, and this is the one I'm going to demonstrate a little bit later. Now, generally, Kindle Spy runs you about $97, but they run frequent sales. I just checked it last night, and they had a sale on it for $47. Now, if you're going to be doing a lot of research in the different genres in the Amazon charts, I think it's definitely worth the price for all the time it'll save you. You could do all this stuff manually, but I think the time it saves you is definitely worth the cost. But one thing I noticed as time went on with the series, with each successive book that I released, the books became less profitable over time. And I understood my next hard lesson. Nothing lasts forever. Now, there are some series that can go on in perpetuity. I know some urban fantasy authors who are 20 books into their series, and they're still killing it. But those tend to be the exception rather than the rule. However, that Luther Cross series still has fans. And rather than just completely abandoning it, I decided to do something else. I created a spin-off series featuring another character who had appeared in those books. Luther's story may be over for now, but that world lives on. A spin-off keeps the existing fans interested because you're still telling stories about that world, but it also creates entry points for new fans. And once I have those new fans on my mailing list, then I can direct them to those older books. So those older books still remain profitable over time. Now that brings me to my next lesson. You need to get a mailing list. None of the ebook vendors will give you the contact information for the people who buy your books. And, with good reason. I know I certainly don't want Amazon giving my email address to every vendor on the site. But their notifications of when an author has a new book out aren't really reliable. I follow my own author profile on Amazon, and I don't always get an email when I publish a new book. Social media outlets like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they're good, but again, not always reliable. Facebook in particular is increasingly making it difficult to reach people who have chosen to follow your page. And so you have to actually pay money to push announcements in the forms of boosted posts to get all your page followers to look at it. A mailing list is a lot more reliable. Now, the way I run my email list is I give a free offer, and I put that offer with a link at the beginning and the end of my ebooks. Now, these are better as exclusive offers, so people can't just go to Amazon and buy the books themselves if they don't want to give up their email address. So for the Luther Cross series, I offer them this collection. It has all the previously published short stories, as well as an original novella that's not available anywhere else. And for the Morningstar series, I offer them this prequel novella. So they sign up, they get the free book, and now I can let them know about not only my new releases, but also my existing books. So for more on this, I do recommend you check out Newsletter Ninja by Tammy Labrecque. And there are 3 big things that I got from this book. First, you give readers a reason to sign up, right? So I give them that free book, and that's why they decide to sign up. Second, you set up an onboarding sequence. And when you set up an onboarding sequence, that it's a series of emails that they get when they first sign up. And so I use that to kind of promote all the books in the series that are out until that point. And then when a new book comes out, I add that email to the onboarding sequence. After that sequence, I move them over to the main list, where then they just get the new release updates. And the third is you want to be consistent with your emails. I let, with my onboarding sequence, it sends out an email about every 2 weeks to every month. Once they're on the mailing list, I try to get something out to them every month or so. Now, again, I recommend you read Tammy's book, because she's got a lot more advice about how to do this. So now I mentioned before that another important decision that you have to make is whether your books will be exclusive to Kindle, or if you're going to go wide to all the retailers, such as Kobo and iBooks. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. First, with KDP Select, one of those advantages is Kindle Unlimited. If you enroll your books in KDP Select, your books will automatically get added to the Kindle Unlimited. And it's kind of like a Netflix for books. Readers will pay a monthly fee. They can read as many books in the program as they want. Authors get a paid rate for every page someone reads. Plus, they get a boost in Amazon rankings when someone borrows the book. Promotional tools, free days, Kindle countdown deals. These are things you get access to in every 90-day period to do a free promotion or a countdown deal where you can set the price as low as 99 cents, but still get that 70% royalty. And then you can set the price to increase over the course of the week. A downside is your ebooks must be exclusive to Amazon. The biggest downside here is that the readers on the other platforms, they won't be able to get your ebook then. Now, for the other side of it, some of these retailers are more popular in other countries. Kobo and iBooks, Amazon is very popular in the US, but Kobo and iBooks are more popular outside the US. I know Kobo especially has a big market in Canada and Europe as well. And readers also might be more comfortable spending a higher price on those books too. Another one is you're not beholden to Amazon. So if you've got issues with Amazon's power in the industry, this ethics issue might be more important to you. And staying out of their exclusivity program means not giving them more control over the industry. However, it's also harder for your books to be discovered. Amazon charts are algorithmically driven. But the other stores, they're not, right? They operate more like the old bookstores, the old bookstore system. So that means that priority is given to either traditional publishers or the books are curated by the staff, right? They pick which books they think their readers will like the most. Now, ultimately, the choice between KDP Select or Wide is a personal one. It's been a contentious issue in the self-publishing community. It remains a contentious debate. It will probably continue to be a contentious issue. Despite my objections to Amazon's practices, I do tend to make more money off of Kindle Unlimited reads alone than I made off all the profits on all the other platforms combined. But I am starting to reconsider, right? I'm looking at some of my older titles that they've dried up in Kindle Unlimited, and I'm thinking about putting them on the other vendors. Now, the good news is that if you want to go into KDP Select, you only have to commit to 90 days of exclusivity. You can then choose to take the books out and go wide to all the other platforms. Some authors go with the way of releasing new books into KDP Select, and then after 90 days, they put them on all the other platforms. Okay, now let's say you become a disciplined writer, you found a great market, you've got the book ready to go with the killer cover. How do you get eyes on it? This is the final lesson that I want to touch on. Free advertising will only get you so far. Early on in the Kindle Revolution, back in what was called the Kindle Gold Rush days, free advertising was so easy. Amazon would let you make your book for free and then move it to the paid chart, and it would shoot up to the top. You could spam your book links all over social media, and people would buy them. everyone had these shiny new Kindles and iPads, and they would load them up with every 99-cent book they could find. But then ebooks stopped being the cool new thing, and competition became a lot stronger. Before, an author could slap up a simple cover they made in Microsoft Paint or in a Kindle cover creator, and they could rake in the sales. But now readers don't care if your book is self-published or traditional. They still want a professional cover. They get annoyed if you spam your book links, and Facebook and Amazon now force you to pay to play. So the only way to really get eyes on your book is by using paid advertising. Now, fortunately, this does not have to be a money sink. You can start small, try doing $5 per day advertising on Facebook or Amazon. Get in some sales and slowly build up your budget. And then you can also try advertising your backlist. Like I said, I run occasional ads on my old titles, and it helps them earn a little bit more money. There are also book promotion sites, with BookBub being the biggest and the most expensive, but it's also really difficult to get a promotion with them. Others are cheaper and easier to land and also produce good results. So not as good as BookBub, but it's still worth the price. Robin Reads is one of them. The Fussy Librarian is another. And then there are genre-specific promotions, like the Book Barbarian is really good for sci-fi and fantasy, for example. There are also a lot of different guides out there for using these services. These are 3 books that I recommend. Mastering Amazon Ads by Brian D. Meeks. Help, My Facebook Ads Suck. Second edition, it's got a little bit more content than the first, by Mal and Jill Cooper. And BookBub Ads Explained by David Gogren. These are all great places to start, and I'd recommend trying these before you do things like dumping hundreds of dollars on an author advertising course or something like that. Another thing is repurposing content, right? You've got your book, but you can still make money in other ways. Obviously, you want to put it out in ebook and paperbacks, but they're not the only ways you can repurpose that old content. You can also make digital box sets and omnibuses, where you put several books in the series together. And you set them at a higher price. Now, I found these work really well for Kindle Unlimited because you'll get, people will commit to reading the whole series pretty much. And the total amount you get from those page reads might be worth more than the actual sale of a digital copy. The readers are happy because they get the book as part of their Kindle Unlimited subscription. They get the entire series in one place. I'm happy because I make more money off of it. You could also do hardcovers. Amazon's KDP Print doesn't offer this option, but Ingram Spark does. It's going to cost you a little bit more because you have to have an ISBN for that, and you have to also pay a setup fee. But if you're making good money in print, you might want to consider it. Maybe at least for hardcover editions or special editions like omnibuses and that thing. Audiobooks are another option. You can use, you can pay for an Audible audio narrator, or you can use Audible's ACX program to find a narrator with a royalty share component. You won't make as much money, but that's another option. And also, comic books or graphic novels, right? If you get an art team together, you get someone to adapt the script, you can put out a comic book, and you can also do that digitally and in paperback format. There are very easy ways to do that. KDP lets you do that. Comixology is for digital comic books. Kablam is a website that prints comic books, print on demand. So all of these are really good options for repurposing your existing content. That about brings me to the end of the journey. Now, I'm not a massively successful author. I still have a day job. Nobody from Netflix is banging down my door, but I have managed to carve out a decent part-time income. This past year has been slower than usual, but that's because I haven't been producing as much content. I've had 2 book releases this year, and one of them was a new series that unfortunately did not go well at all. But I am preparing a 3rd book in the Morningstar series, which the 2nd book, I should say, and that will be coming out very soon. And that series has been doing very well so far, just on 1 book. But if you're interested in self-publishing, or you'd like to get more mileage out of your self-published books, then these are some good places to start, some of the things I've talked about today. And then here are some places where you can find me online. If you have more questions, you're more than welcome to get in touch with me. There are more resources I can recommend, and I just didn't really have enough time to go over them all today. And once more, if you do want a recording of the presentation, please email me and I'll get it to you as soon as I possibly can. Other than that, thanks for your attention. And now I'd like to kind of open the floor for any questions you might have. You can either type your question in the chat, and I see a few people have already been doing that, or if you use the raise hand button, you'll find in the participants window, and you'd like to ask a question out loud, then I'll please do it that way and I'll call out to you. So the first question we have here is from Elizabeth, and she said that since starting self-publishing, I've done a lot of research about the genre that would be popular. Have I ever thought about trying traditional publishing again with a pitch that reflects that experience? Not really. I do some stuff for some small presses. I've got a novel actually that's waiting with a small press. But the work I've done for them, it's the money I make off that. It's actually much lower than my self-publishing income. And to be honest, I kind of like the indie mentality. I'm really comfortable with the way I do things, and I really like the process that I've gotten accustomed to. Next question is from Alex. He says, could I say more about specific steps of publishing while living in Japan with a Japanese address? For example, buying an ISBN. Most of the resources he's found are only about self-publishing in the US or the UK. There's not really a whole lot of difference. The ISBN you don't really have to worry about, to be honest with you. Unless you want to print your paperbacks through Ingram, so if you want to do hardcovers or that kind of thing, then you would need an ISBN. Otherwise, KDP Print gives you a free ISBN, and that's worked fine for me. It works fine for a lot of people. The only real benefit of having the ISBNs is that you're listing yourself as the publisher. But honestly, I don't make enough money off of paperbacks to really worry about that. Other things, I haven't had many problems. I do have a US credit card though, and I do keep a US bank account. But before that, for a long time, I didn't. And I was still able to get profits deposited into my Japanese bank account. You might want to make sure that it's something like Shinsei Bank or Citibank or something like that. Or I think Japan Post works as well. But I used to have a local bank here in Kagoshima, and they would not accept any of the deposits from Amazon. Okay, John Paul Catton asks, when you made the first book of each series free, were they perma-free or did you use some other method? When I made them, mostly these days, because I'm on Kindle only for most of my books, you can't do perma-free if you're exclusive to Kindle, because Kindle doesn't let you allow it. So I've only done the free promotions. But if you're wide on the other platforms, you can make the first in series permanently free, and then you can price match on Amazon. Marco Lobo says that thinks a lot of this can apply to traditional publishing as well. I think so. I think there's definitely to it. And then some other stuff here. Marco also said he bought Publisher Rocket to research categories, keywords, and so on. Yes, I do use Publisher Rocket. I thought it's very helpful, especially for Amazon ads, but it's not the be-all, end-all, so I would still double-check some stuff. And also I see Mark Cord has a question. So Mark, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Hi, Percival. How do you split your time now between creating the content in the books and marketing the books? And how happy are you with your present split?
That's a good question. It's not as disciplined as it probably should be, to be honest. But I would like to devote more time to it. Yeah, it's just with so much going on this year.
More time to
both actually. Like I've fallen behind on writing this year. I've fallen behind on marketing. So I would like to make time to get better at both of those. But it's a struggle, right? It's something that there are times when I'm really on the ball about it, and other times when I kind of fall behind. So, you know, you just kind of try to take it day by day, I guess. Try to stick to it as much as possible. Okay, Kathleen Riggins asks how to get comments for my books on Kindle. People buy books that have more comments. So you're talking about reviews. To be honest, reviews it's difficult. There are a lot of resources you can try. One of the things that I think the easiest thing you can do is put a message at the end of the book as soon as they finish, and, say thank you for reading the book and include a link to the book on Amazon and say, please leave me a review. Surprisingly, that does help a lot. There are other things you can do. There are lots of different sites out there where you can try to gather reviews, and where you have to pay them and they will send out review copies to people. There are a lot of different ways. I personally don't really get into too much of that anymore. I've just found that the amount of money and the amount of time I invested to it, it didn't really pay off as well as I had hoped. So now I just kind of leave it up to organic reviews. All right. And then Ryan Davis says, with all the money you make, what would you say is your overall hourly rate? And what do you do for an editor? Do you just edit your books yourself, or do you pay someone to do it for you? I don't know what the hourly rate would be because it's not consistent. I make anywhere from about a few hundred to a few thousand dollars a month off of my book sales. So it's, I think last year it was like maybe 15,000 total I made in book sales. So it's not a whole lot of money. It's, obviously if it was my only income, it would be below the poverty line. But it's a nice boost, especially living here in Japan in a rural area where the cost of living is much cheaper. For editors, I am a professional editor myself. So that's another way I make some side income is I do a lot of editing on my own. So I do a lot of editing myself. I also use tools like, I think it's called Grammarly is one tool. There are some other ones too. I have used editors in the past. But yeah, that's what I do. And so yeah, let's see. Any other questions anyone has? We've got about a few more minutes left.
Excuse me, about audiobooks.
Yes.
Is it expensive to get an audiobook? I don't know the system for audiobooks.
Yeah, it can be expensive. There are a few different resources. You can use the Audible ACX. They have listings where you can find narrators on there, and they will tell you what their hourly rate is. And it's usually per finished hour, and it can be somewhere, it can be hundreds of dollars or something like that. So it can be pretty expensive. Other options, Findaway Voices is another website, but ACX also has a royalty share program where you find narrators who are willing to basically work for back-end payment. And if you guys agree to go exclusive to Audible for that, you will each get 20%. You will each get 20% of the profits of each book sale. The royalty share has not been, it's gone down in popularity because it used to be like 40% royalties that each of you got, but now they knocked it down to 20%. So it's become less popular with more experienced narrators. But that is an option if you don't really have the money to invest into it, is to try the royalty share option. One of the downsides is you have to commit to keeping your books exclusive to Audible for 7 years. And they still distribute to iTunes and all that, but it's still going to be exclusive to them for 7 years that way. All right. Next, Ryan asks if I do keyword research. To some extent. I mostly do it when I'm doing Amazon advertising, and I use Marco mentioned Publisher Rocket. I use a lot of that for it. It's one of those things where you can spend a lot of time doing it, or you can spend a little bit of time. I mostly concentrate on doing it. Maybe I'll spend about a few hours or so when I'm setting up an ad campaign, and then I'll kind of go from there. Winifred said, how do I choose my cover art? Spoke about changes I made. Curious if I made. A lot of my covers were made on my own, but some of them were also made by cover designers. So I kind of approach it on a project by project basis. If it's something I feel like I can't do justice to on my own, then I'll get a cover designer to do it. Ivan asked, did I create my own company for tax purposes? No, not yet. The money I'm making just hasn't really justified going through all that processes and trying to figure out, do I set it up in Japan? Do I set it up in America? How do I work through all that? right now I'm fine just being a sole proprietor. It's working out just fine for me. Beryl Hawkins asked about copyright infringement. I have had a few instances where books have ended up on pirate sites. I don't devote too much time to it. When I find out about it, I just go ahead and I send a DMCA notice, and that usually solves the problem, but I don't really go around looking for it too much. Generally, most of those sites, they're not really hosting the books. They're just kind of like data scraping, and they're hosting virus files and all that. But I do send it when I find it. But it's not something I worry about too much. I do put a note at the beginning of my books saying, like, if you like this book, if you got it from somewhere, then, you might want to consider supporting the author. And I include links to other books at the end of it as well. So I might end up getting some fans that way, right? Someone who downloads an illegal copy and then they click the link and they get the next book. It could happen, but it's not something I worry too much about. Okay, so that is the end of my time. Thanks again. Sorry I didn't have enough time to kind of go through the rank explanation, but as I mentioned before, if you get Chris Fox's Right to Market, it will explain all those steps, and it's definitely worth it investing the research into what categories might be best for the types of books you want to write. And again, if you do have anything else you want to ask me, please feel free to send me an email, or you can also contact me through the website or through social media. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. I'll also be in the happy hour room as well, so if you have any other questions, you can ask me then too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.